Hello, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up where I talk about the books that I read, what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week. I was traveling last week, hence why you didn't get a video then. Read a lot of books on a flight, so let me share with you some highlights and key aspects of them, because I have 7 to talk about this week. I want to do them justice, but not all of them deserve a full amount of time. So let me jump right in and get started. The first book that I finished, I did this on audio, and this is The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese. Verghese is known for being a doctor. He actually is a professor at Stanford, from what I understand, and but also a writer. And so he's written some books in the past that have gotten a lot of acclaim. And this is his newest book that also has gotten a lot of fanfare. In fact, Oprah picked it for her book club. I really liked his last book, so I had high expectations coming into this. It's the story set in Kerala in India of a family, multi-generational family. And we meet Mariama while she is a very young girl. She's 12 and she's being married off to an older widow. And she's going to be sent to live with him. And the older man is significantly older, but he also recognizes that this is not necessarily an appropriate marriage because she is so young. So he is kind and thoughtful. She immediately steps in to take over the duties of as a stepmother to his young son. And he proceeds to be kind and thoughtful and not engage in any kind of marital relationships until she is 19. The family that she married into has a curse upon it where one person from every generation has an accident with water and drowns and dies. Now, this is very difficult because Kerala is very much a water-based area and water is everywhere. So that's kind of one storyline, is her growing up in this new family, falling in love with this man, the curse, and how they remain vigilant. There's another storyline, and there's a doctor, Dr. Digby, and he is a Scottish man who was trying to get training in London, but because he was a Scot, he was discriminated against, oppressed because of it, and not given any opportunity. So he joined up for India, a rotation in India, so that he could serve as a medical doctor and get his training there. And he makes note that now all of a sudden he's the oppressor and how uncomfortable that makes him. He develops feelings for a woman. She is married to his boss. And this creates a lot of conflict and a lot of challenges for both of them. So we've got these 2 storylines, and in the middle of it, or kind of woven throughout, is all of this medical understanding, medicine, surgery. There's a leper colony, all of these things. And while it's interesting, my fundamental challenge with this book is it is too long. This book felt at times tedious. And there's so many side plots, there's so many side storylines that it just felt extraneous. It felt I felt that it weakened the core storylines that we were following, and we weren't able to make the kind of depth in the characters that you would have if you would have stuck with just them and their story. So yeah, it's a big book. It's a big book, and I think it's going to do well because it's Oprah. It's an Oprah book, but it was a bit of a bummer for me because I really loved Cutting for Stone, which was his last book. Let me get to a book that I really liked. This one I got from Edelweiss, which is similar to NetGalley for digital arcs. This book, ironically, was also on the International Booker shortlist, and it's Boulder by Ava Baltasar. and I forget the translator's name off the top of my head, but I'll put links to that below. This was really interesting. Very fresh voice, very different. We have the story of Boulder. Boulder is a very independent woman. She's very isolated. She's guarded, very difficult. Boulder is a young woman who is a line cook on a ship. And where she's living is off the coast of Chile, I think. And she is really happy with her life. She's content to just do her job, drink in the evening, and to have a very, very simple life, not a lot of attachments, not a lot of responsibilities to others. She can come and go as she wants. Her life completely changes one night when she's at a bar on shore and she meets Samsa, and she falls absolutely gobsmacked, lust at first sight for Samsa, takes her home, and immediately there's a connection. They proceed to have this relationship where she will be on the ship and then she'll meet up with Samsa and they'll enjoy each other's company, and this goes on for a good long while. And then Samsa wants to go to her next assignment, which she is a geologist, and so she wants to go to Iceland. The idea of being away from her is too much, and so Boulder follows her to Iceland and takes up a job at a restaurant and then opens her own kind of restaurant stand selling empanadas. Does very, very well, is well respected, well known, and is trying to cohabitate. At first, there's a challenge in the type of home that she wants. Is kind of simple, utilitarian, not very fancy, but Samsa wants to nest. Samsa wants to have a home. Samsa's growing in her career, and she wants that to be reflected in how she lives her life. That's the first bit of challenge and rub to the relationship. The next one is that Samsa decides that she wants to have a child, desperately wants to have a child, and becomes obsessed and fixates on it. And this has tremendous fissures in the relationship because Boulder has no interest whatsoever in not just having a child, but even the concept, the idea, any of it. What does it mean as an independent woman to have a child? And so they go through a lot of changes. A lot of dynamics are at play. I thought this was an incredible look really deeply at someone who kind of gets pulled into a situation because of love. And the observations she makes during the entire process were fantastic, really poignant, very painful, very difficult, but an important conversation. I thought this was very, very good, and I look forward to seeing how this ranks when it comes to the winner of International Booker. The next book I finished, this is a French novel. This is Vernon's Subutex, #2 by Virginie Despentes, translated by Frank Wynne from the French. I mentioned that I really liked the first one of these. This is like a modern tale of kind of like sprawling look at French society, or a subset of French society. In this edition, we have Vernon, who is a former record store owner that was kind of like in the midst of everything. He had rock star friends, porn star friends, kind of his pulse on the underground. And people loved to kind of congregate around him at his record store. When the record store goes under, he ends up being homeless because he cannot admit to people that he's in trouble. In this book, we meet back up with him, and he is now living rough. That is his existence, and we find out how he's been doing that. We also find out that his friends are onto him, and they think they know where he is. one of the more poignant portions of the book, it happens early in the book, so no spoilers here, is there is a staged intervention to try to bring him off the streets. And he really doesn't have an interest in doing that. He's found a level of freedom, an anti-materialistic way of being that works for him, and he is not interested in coming off the streets. But people are always still rallying around him. He becomes like this cultish figure, and they go to hang out with him near where he's camping / living. There's a subplot from the first book that carries through, and that is that his best friend was filmed by him telling a story. Ironically, he doesn't remember it because he fell asleep during the filming, and his friend just started telling his story to the camera. And this has become a very important piece of footage that everyone is looking for. And we finally find out why that is in this book. So additional intrigue, which I think will roll into the third book. So I didn't love it as much as I really liked the first one. We'll see what I think after the third. So I will continue with this since it's a trilogy. Then I read my first Barbara Comyns. This is The Vet's Daughter. I've heard about this book forever, but haven't read it. This book, The Vet's Daughter, is very similar in tone and tenor to this one. This is Lolly Willowes by Sylvia Townsend Warner. Both of these books take what are presumably normal occurrences, and there's a sprinkle, a specific touch of magic that is kind of interwoven into the story. This one was wild and weird. This was, I think it was written in like 1926. And you read it and it'll blow your mind. You're like, wait, what? This one was written in 1959. This is set in London, and we meet a young girl, and the young girl is being raised in really, really sad circumstances. Her abusive, horrible, difficult father is a veterinarian, and they are living kind of in a seedy part of London, in a seedy neighborhood. And his father is a veterinarian, but he's a horrible person. He doesn't have the kind of kindness that you assume from a veterinarian, or maybe that I do. He's kind of a mercenary. He doesn't care about animals. He doesn't care about people. He abuses the mother. The mother's very ill, but is determined to make sure that things are running smoothly, and to her detriment, and to specifically the detriment of her health. We see Alice as she's growing up, and she's very lonely. She tries to make friends, but she doesn't have many people in her life that are looking out for her. So this is a coming of age story with those difficult circumstances. She does have one thing that she realizes, and that she has the ability to do something that she thinks is normal. And as she starts to make a very, very few friends, and she asks them how they do it, they very quickly are shocked and perturbed, a little frightened, because it's that unusual. So even though this is a classic, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll leave it at that to say this was a surprise. It was poignant, a little weird, but really great book. I can see why it's so beloved. Then the next book was from NetGalley, and this is a character in mythology that I have always wondered about. This is Clytemnestra, and this was written by Costanza Casati. What I always think about when I think of Clytemnestra is the longest, most patient revenge story ever. So when I saw this pop up, I was like, yeah, I want to know more about that. So this is in the spirit of the retellings that are popping up, the feminist retellings, giving voice to the stories of the women of the Greek mythologies. And Clytemnestra being the sister of Helen, being a princess of Sparta, being raised as a warrior. She is married to her first love and has a son with him, only to have that son and husband murdered. She then is married off to the murderer by her father as a means to unite factions. I'm not going to say too much about the story other than to say that I think many people know the story of Clytemnestra, where her husband Agamemnon, same horrible husband, sacrificed their daughter to the gods to get some wind so that he can go and fight a battle in Troy. I will say the thing I loved best about this book is that they played out the revenge saga in the best way possible, and it was delicious. It was absolutely delicious, knowing where the story was going, if you know your Greek mythology. If not, I'm not going to spoil anything. Knowing where it was going and watching it all come together, really, really satisfying. So then after that, I got another NetGalley that I'm trying to check off my list. This is a recent release, a book by someone that I read their first novel and was intrigued. This is Namwali Shepell, who wrote The Old Drift. The Old Drift was this really experimental, expansive, wild story. So I expected another really bold book. This book is The Furrows. And with this book, it was less experimental at the beginning. It was very straightforward. We have the story of Cassandra, who goes out with her brother Wynne, and they're at the beach. They're swimming, and her brother drowns, and she sees him drown, and she is unable to save him. But his body is not found. And her parents refuse to believe her. They refuse to believe that nothing happened. And because she was brought back to the house by a strange man who didn't stay around, they assume that something bad happened. So in that sense, it's a deep story of grief and understanding from these different perspectives. The young girl who has grief plus guilt plus anxiety, the parents who just want to know what happened and are left with a child that's pretty broken, but at the same time wanting to do everything they can to bring back and find their other child. I thought that storyline was fantastic, very interesting. But there was the introduction of another character, and that character has the same name, the exact same name as her brother. And there's a doppelganger effect that happens. It happens in a couple different ways in that part of the book. And I just didn't understand it. I didn't get it. It didn't sit well with me. I didn't believe it. You know, and you don't have to believe it, especially with this type of magical realism or alternative ways of approaching the story, but it didn't connect with me in the ways that the first part of the book did. So for me, this was a miss. But let me tell you about a book that I literally could not put this down. This is also NetGalley. Thank you very much to the publisher for giving me access to all of those NetGalley books and the Edelweiss book. This is The Guest by Emma Cline. One of the things I love so much about reading is when you get to be in somebody else's mind, you get to be in somebody else's experience, and it's so completely different than anything you would ever do. And that's what this wild ride was. We have Alex, who's a 22-year-old hustler. Like she's a party girl. She knows all of the places in New York to find sugar daddies. She's been kicked out of most of the hotels. She has kind of run her way through New York City to a certain degree, and she's specifically outlived her welcome with this one man. And we're not sure at the beginning what she's done, but we know that she's running from him and he is trying to find her. She also has outlived her welcome with her roommates, and so they also give her the boot. So she does find a man, and he takes her with him to the coast, whether it's the Hamptons, I'm not really sure, but it's somewhere where has this gorgeous home and personal assistant, and he's just living life up. She becomes very attached to this lifestyle and very happy to be doing whatever she can to make him happy so she can secure herself while she thinks about how she's going to get out of this jam she's gotten herself into with this man, Dominic. She convinces herself that Simon, the man that she's with now, he'll help her. She just has to lay the foundation and let him know what's happened, and of course he'll help her. She's convinced of it. At a dinner party at Simon's friend's house, she makes a few bad decisions and gets the attention of the husband of the host, and gets herself in a situation that, while isn't compromising, it definitely was out of bounds. And she is kicked out of Simon's house. She has nothing. She has absolutely nothing, but she has convinced herself that Simon is just mad at her. She's going to show back up in 7 days at a big party that he has, and she'll explain everything there. He'll have enough time to miss her, and she'll be swept right back into his arms. And the next week is spent on the streets, hustling, trying to figure out how she's going to stay nearby, dodge Dominic, but at the same time get back in with the good graces with Simon. And all sorts of things happen. It was such a good compulsive read. I couldn't put it down. She makes horrible decisions, but she also has this way of connecting with people, and people trust her and they listen to her, as any good con person can do. So it was a compelling, compulsive read. I couldn't put it down. Loved it. So now let's talk about what I'm currently reading. Finishing this up, this is the collected stories of Shirley Hazzard. I'm doing a group deep dive in Shirley Hazzard's work, and this is the last of her fiction that we are reading. Everybody else, I wasn't able to check in last week, so I have to catch up on those stories, and then this will be done. Speaking of stories, I do want to finish Paris Stories by Mavis Gallant. It is something that I have put off to the side, but I'm keeping it here because I do want to finish it. Then with my friend Natalie at A Curious Reader, we have picked up Magda Szabo. We've been reading a few of Magda Szabo's works together. This is Isa's Ballad, and this is translated by George Zertes. So it's not Len Ricks that's translating this one. This book is so good. It's so good. Magda Szabo tends to be a intellectual writer. She tends to be someone who writes about relationships, especially relationships between women, in a specific way. In this case, she's writing about a mother and a daughter. And it's poignant. It's so heartfelt. There is so much happening. Missed signals, misunderstandings, best intentions gone horribly wrong. We're halfway through, and it's already devastatingly beautiful. So can't wait to read more of this with her. And then with Leo from Leo's Little Book Life, he and I have moved on to Sybil Bedford. So this is a favorite of the gods. This cover is everything. This is by Daunt Publishing. Sybil Bedford, this is our first Sybil Bedford. This book is already phenomenal. It's the story of a family, an American wife and an Italian prince, and the ramifications of his infidelity and her discovering it on the family. And so we have a few generations that we're following, but high melodrama, beautiful writing, very entertaining. I'm enjoying it, and Leo and I are enjoying it very, very much. Then I'm taking a class soon, later on this year, on William Shakespeare. So this is one of my books I have to read. This is The Soul of the Age, The Life, Mind, and World of William Shakespeare by Jonathan Bate. So I need to start cracking on this. I've read about 11 pages, and I like his tone. It's nonfiction, but very approachable, really readable. So looking forward to this. And then the next up in the Shirley Hazzard group read, a few of us, not everyone, but I would say many of us, are going to continue on with this new release. This is Shirley Hazzard, A Writing Life. This is by Brigitte Olibas. We're going to be reading this to see what insights we can get about Shirley Hazzard from her life. So looking forward to reading this over the next month with everyone from the reading group. So as you can see, I have plenty to keep me busy. I would love to know, have you read any of these and what were your thoughts? And as always, I look forward to talking to you again soon. I hope you have a great reading week. Bye.